Hey guys, Dave with First Place Auto Parts. We're out in the shop today working on the Chevelle behind me, and one of the things that we're getting close to doing is installing the power booster and the master cylinder onto the firewall. Now, four-wheel disc brake conversion kits have become very popular. You have a lot of different options, and at First Place Auto Parts, we have everything you could ever want from mild to wild when it comes to upgrading your brakes. One of the things in that procedure that you have to do before you install this new booster and master cylinder is you got to verify that the pin depth coming out of the booster going into the master cylinder is set correctly. And what we have to do is we have to measure and adjust that to make sure that we don't have preload on this master cylinder. What happens when you have preload is a lot of things. First of all, typically you can't bleed the brakes properly, and secondly, it can lock the brakes up because it's applying piston pressure even under no load whatsoever when you're not pushing on the brake pedal. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to not only measure that piston depth, but also how to adjust the push rod to make sure that it sits right, exactly right, and the brakes work exactly as they're supposed to and that they're designed to. So stay tuned today, guys. Today we're going to show you how to measure and adjust the piston pin coming out of the booster going into the master cylinder so that your brakes work right the first time and work right every time. So stay tuned. Hey guys, if you like today's video, please consider subscribing to the First Place Auto Parts YouTube channel. We're going to continually be adding new videos every week where we show you how to put new parts on. We take a look at the latest parts that are available, and we go to some pretty cool car guy stuff I'm pretty sure you're going to want to see. Now, when it comes time to checking the piston depth into the bore of the master cylinder, there's two ways to do that. The first way is to use clay, and what we want to do first is to remove the master cylinder from the booster as you get it out of the package. If you're going to use the clay method, what you're going to do is you're going to put a small amount of clay into this depressed area, this recessed area of the piston bore, and you would reassemble this piece onto the booster, tighten it down, pull it back apart, and then you would measure the witness mark that was made by the clay. What we're trying to achieve is we're trying to achieve a 1/16 of an inch distance between the actual tip of the push rod right here and the piston bore itself. 1/16 of an inch is not very much. Think of a human hair. It doesn't take a lot of distance. We just want to make sure that we don't have any preload when we bolt this master cylinder down to this booster from this piston pin. The other way, and it's a little more accurate, the clay way is, quite honestly, it's really hard to measure and it's hard to get very accurate. There's a tool they make for this process, and they're fairly inexpensive. It's one of those tools that's good to have in your toolbox, and you may only use it once. But look, if you have preload on this, when you assemble this, the difficulties in bleeding the system, it may be impossible, not to mention the brakes are not going to work the way they should. This tool would be one of those tools that you consider to be critical. Now, what's neat about this tool is it's made to measure both the depth on the master cylinder, but also the power booster. As you can see here, it has a master on one side with an arrow pointing up, which is we'll put this end against the master cylinder bolt, the mounting gears. And this one says booster with an arrow pointing this way. So we'll take this tool and we'll put it on the back side of this master cylinder right here, and we're going to push it down until the ears meet the mounting flange. And what we've gotten with the depth of this tube in the middle is the depth of the piston to the mounting flange itself. Then after that, what we do is we're going to take this tool and mount it to the front of this where it says booster with the arrow, and it's going to show us the distance of the piston pin. So let's go ahead and get started with transferring the measurement from the master cylinder to the booster. And by putting this in here and just aligning the pole in the middle with the tip of the booster pin, push pin, I can see that this piston pin is adjusted too far out. If I were to mount this assembly as it's delivered, it would be applying preload to the master cylinder, and that's not what we want. So we have to go ahead and adjust the preload or the depth on this piston pin until it matches this depth. So let's go ahead and get started on doing that. I'm going to show you how. It's pretty simple. Just make sure that we get it right. Once we determine that adjustment is needed on the push pin coming out of the booster itself, we take an 8mm nut driver and we want to loosen up the lock nut that's on the back side of the pin. We go ahead and loosen that up. We'll turn the lock nut counterclockwise and loosen it up so that we can adjust the pin inwards or turning it clockwise. And we turn that clockwise in a couple of turns. And then we go ahead and we take our tool that we've already measured the depth on our master cylinder, and we see if we've gone far enough. In this case, we've gone a little too far, so we'll back that out. Again, what we're trying to find is a 1/16 distance clearance between the actual pin on the tool and also the piston pin coming out of the booster. So it looks like we have it just about right here. We can move the tool across the opening, not touch the pin itself. Now, if you put too much clearance on this, if you screw this pin in too far, what you'll find is that your brake throw will be a little bit further into the actual pedal effort. So you'll have to push the pedal further before this pin will activate on the backside of the master cylinder. We don't want that either. We don't want preload, but we don't want this pin too far away from the bore, the piston on the back of the master cylinder. So look for or try to achieve a 1/16 of an inch. Again, it's about a human hair's thickness on the distance between the actual pin itself and the tool that you've measured the bore depth on the master cylinder. Like I said, once we're done with that, what we want to do is go ahead and carefully tighten up the lock nut on the backside, turn it by hand, use the tool or the wrench again to snug it. You don't want to have to go nuts on it. It's not a very big nut. And go ahead and just check one last time for the measurement to make sure it hasn't changed at all. In this case, we're good. After that, we can go ahead and install our master cylinder back onto the power booster and feel confident that we do not have preload on this unit like we would have if we had not checked this before when we just took it right out of the box. Adjusting the brake booster push rod to master cylinder clearance is a critical step in making sure that your brakes operate and function properly the first time. Look guys, you want to do this on a workbench before you fill this master cylinder up with brake fluid. It's not an easy operation. It can be really messy if you have to start pulling this master cylinder on and off to go ahead and measure this piston clearance. And trust me, you're going to have to measure that no matter what you're doing with this. You want to make sure you don't have a preloaded situation because it can be bad for operation. It can also make it impossible to bleed your brakes once you get them installed. So go ahead and measure this actual push rod clearance and you'll be good to go. Your brakes will work right the first time. They're going to work right every time you apply them. Guys, I appreciate you watching this video, and at First Place Auto Parts we literally have hundreds of four-wheel disc brake conversion kits and master cylinder and power booster kits, along with pre-bent fuel and brake lines for every make and model of vehicle. Well, it doesn't matter if it's an early American classic muscle car or a late model car or truck, we have got what you need to make sure that your car stops not only better but also safer. Plus we have tons of restoration performance parts that everybody can use for their project. Guys, until next time, keep the hammer down and keep it between the guardrails.